that doesn't work. And I'm going to start the recording early because I didn't do that the last time.
Recording in progress.
Let me let Dave in. No, oh, he's still joining. Just wait until Dave Cowell gets in. The representation for 2 Maple.
Okay. He appears to be in.
Great. Hello, everyone. It's Chuck Tirone, the Reading Conservation Administrator. Consistent with the governor's orders superseding certain provisions of the open meeting law and allow us to adhere to social distancing requirements during this COVID-19 crisis, this Town of Reading Conservation Commission meeting is being held virtually via Zoom for audio and video participation of the commission members, applicants, and their representatives and the public. During this meeting, myself, or the conservation chair will unmute commissioners, applicants, representatives, and members of the public individually as needed. During the commission meeting, the chair will be the only one to permit shared video. These controls are in place to ensure that tonight's meeting is being held for safe and effective meeting. At this time, Chair Martha Moore will conduct a roll call vote to confirm that all members are present and that they can hear.
Okay, and I will also request if there is a member of the commission who is willing to take the minutes for this meeting, I would appreciate it. Do we have any volunteers able to do that?
Give that a shot, Martha.
Okay, thank you, Bill. Most importantly, we need the vote counts for motions and also who made those motions.
Yeah, and would it be possible for Chuck or yourself to get me a Word copy of the agenda later? It'd just be easier to make notes off of that rather than a PDF.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So roll call for tonight. And this will also be the order in which we vote. I'm going to start with Brian.
Brian Bro, Vice Chair, present.
Bill,
Bill McCants, member, present.
Andrew,
Andrew Dribbin, member, present.
John,
John Sullivan, member, present.
and I'm Martha Moore, Chair, present. And we have 2 associate members with us. Tony,
present.
and Walter, I know you're haven't been joining us, but I think you are actually on the books as an associate member. So you can also say you're present.
I'm present.
All right, thank you. Okay, back to you, Chuck.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Please note that that this meeting is being recorded. Also be aware that other folks may be able to see you. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All of the material for this meeting are available at the Conservation Division page, and I recommend that commission members and the public follow the agenda as posted on the Town of Reading webpage unless otherwise noted. However, because this meeting is being conducted remotely,
Oh dear.
yep, hold on.
Oh, you're still there. Okay.
I'm
I
still
thought you
there.
froze.
Yep, I'll just stop from here. However, because this meeting is being conducted remotely, I advise that applicants in particular that the commission cannot discuss or consider documents which were not previously posted. Information may, however, be posted orally. Similarly, members of the public are encouraged to provide written public comment, but should understand that not all participants nor the commission members will be able to see any written comment during the course of this meeting. Before we get started, On tonight's agenda, I'm going to cover some ground rules for safe and effective and clear conduct of our business to ensure that the meeting minutes are taken accurately. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. After commissioners make their remarks and these remarks have been addressed by the applicant, the chair will afford public comment as follows. The chair will first ask members of the public who wish to speak to identify themselves by name. Once the chair has a list of public commentators, the chair will call on each one by name and afford them 4 minutes for any comment. The applicant may be requested to respond by the chair. After public comment, the chair will once again go down a line of commissioners, inviting each one by name to provide any further comment, question, or motion. Please hold off until your name is called. Finally, each vote taken during the course of tonight's meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. That's what I have.
Okay, it's 7:12 and I'm calling the meeting to order. Our first hearing is Zero Small Lane, and they have requested a continuance until May 24th. So can I have a motion to continue Zero Small Lane to May 24th?
This is Brian. I'll make a motion to continue 0 Small Lane to May 24th.
This is John. I'll second.
Brian Bowe in favor.
Bill McCants in favor.
Andrew Dribbin in favor.
John Sullivan in favor.
Martha Moore in favor. Okay. 37 Colburn Road. While Chuck lets people in, I will read the blurb about it into the minutes. Open the public hearing on a request for determination of applicability filed by David Wall for the town of Reading under the Massachusetts Wetland Protection Act, Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, and/or the Reading Wetland Protection Bylaw, Section 7.1. The applicant proposes to remove part of the current house, including the foundation and old deck, then build an addition with a full foundation on the right side of the house with wraparound deck. Most of the work is within the 100-foot buffer zone to a bordering vegetated wetland. The application and plans can be viewed during regular business hours at the Town Hall Conservation Office, 16 Lowell Street, Reading, Mass. 01867, and on the Conservation Division page under Current Projects. Assessors Map 39, Lot 54, RCC file number 2023-10. And do we have somebody here representing 37 Colburn?
Sure. David Wall, I've unmuted you and given you permission to turn on your video. Are you there, Dave?
Good evening.
Sure. There you go.
Hi, Dave and Julie Wall here.
Hi. I'm going to put up the plan, so that should help you. Hold on 1 second, and you can just start on just giving us an update on your project. And I believe this is it. Yeah. Okay.
Yep, that's the site survey there.
Okay.
So yeah, as Martha had mentioned, our plan is to take off the existing sunroom to the right of our house, which is currently on cinder blocks, and then a new foundation, which is 12 by roughly 25 feet long, would be added on. We spoke with Reading land surveyors to add a dry well and a silt rock bed to help with any changes to the current plan.
Okay. All right. So the dry well is to take runoff from the roof.
That's correct. Yeah, that's on the left side near the shed there.
Okay.
Um,
All right. Some of us went out on a site visit. I don't believe that you were home when we arrived, and so we just walked into the backyard after knocking. Is there somebody who was on that site visit that would like to talk about what we saw when we were there?
Okay. This is Brian. As Martha said, we knocked on the door, went out back. We measured, well, we looked at where the construction is proposed. We went out to the stone wall. We were looking at the placement of the wetland flags. I would say in general, they seem a little bit aggressive, not enough probably to make any changes over. We did notice lots of debris beyond the wall, debris in the form of yard waste, leaves and such. There's the remnants of a old above ground pool back there. So empty plastic potted plant containers, some bricks and what have you. So those are things that when we get to considering this, that I would want to be removed. But in general, it did seem like the construction was far enough away from the wetlands overall. I don't know, does anybody else have anything else they want to add to that brief overview?
Bill,
Yeah, I went out on Saturday morning, and similarly, there didn't happen to be anyone there after I knocked. So, but I just had a question, just something visually. On one of the retaining walls, there's white pipe, just normal drainage, and it wasn't clear to me from the map if the current piping that helps drain the upper part of the property is going to be altered at all by this reconstruction.
No, there was no alteration to anything else besides that one section of the retaining wall for the foundation.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
okay. Anybody on the commission with questions or comments for the applicants? Brian,
Okay, so my question is more of a follow-up on what I was saying during the brief overview. So, Dave and Julie, would you be willing to take on removing those various debris items that I was talking about from back beyond your wall?
Absolutely.
Um,
I don't think we didn't realize about, we've explored back there and found things. I never realized there was pieces of the pool that I mean, maybe it's stuff we've seen. It wasn't our pool, but it's.
Well,
And we're happy to clean up.
Yeah,
anything.
yeah, in all fairness, I don't know it was a pool. I didn't set it up, but it looks like that kind of material.
Yeah,
If you know what I mean.
Well, I certainly don't want to look into the backyard and see any debris back there, so we're happy to clean it up.
definitely.
Okay, and as has been pointed out, it's probably a good time to do that, given it's not fully vegetated yet. So if, to help you with it, the bricks are off to the back right of your property, the debris is mostly to the middle left of center. There's a lot of leaves and maybe grass clippings, I don't remember, back beyond there. And the pool remnants and the plastic pot pretty much directly in the middle, straight up.
Sure.
I think those were the main things that I saw.
Sure. We're happy to clean it up, and we have a compost sticker, so we can bring anything down to the.
Well, I don't think a compost sticker would take an old pool, but
Yeah, I could take care of that separately.
okay. Do you have an idea how long it might take you to get to this?
Oh, we can get it done this weekend.
Oh, okay, good. That'd be great. I would definitely appreciate that. All
Sure,
right, having said that,
absolutely.
thank you. Having said that, back to you, Martha.
okay, Bill has his hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I think the good news is when I was looking in that the debris Brian was talking about, mine was a separate visit. I saw some things that looked like bricks, but I picked them up and they were children's toys. They were actually
Oh.
very convincing little bricks, but they were foam, so.
Oh,
just-
yeah, that's my son. Yeah, he's got like these foam Lego brick type things, yeah.
Right. So I just wanted to add to what Brian said, and I'm sure it'd be encompassed in what you're doing. I was thinking this would be a good chance to reclaim any of those kids' toys that have fallen into the
Yeah, to
wetlands.
put our kids to work too, to
Or
pick
in
up their app
vegetative
with themselves.
Yeah.
Yep, great.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
All right. John,
Thanks, Martha. Unless I overlooked this on the plan, is there a stockpile area for this site? Or is that everything dug up for the new?
For the soil that's coming, being excavated out?
Yeah,
It's not noted on there, but the general contractor was planning to put it as close to the front as possible. Originally planning for the driveway, but I spoke to him today. He said he can, he can put it wherever is agreed upon by this committee.
okay. I think the driveway sounds good to me. I think
Okay.
if you're gonna do it somewhere else, we'd have to, I guess, take a look at what's over there and make sure you're not gonna like run over a tree with the truck to get it there or anything, but.
Yeah, I mean, driveway would be our preference, so it's the least amount of disruption.
Okay.
is that it, John?
That's all for me.
Okay. Anybody else with questions or comments from the commission?
Well,
Okay.
I'm gonna say me. I didn't know if you're gonna.
Mhm.
l-
Yeah,
later on.
I was gonna ask Chuck if he
Sure.
wanted to talk next.
Typically, that's what you do, but I wasn't sure. I just wanted to add that, and you said you were gonna take care of it this weekend. As things start to leaf out, it's gonna be more difficult to find what's in
Mhm.
the back area. So it's good that you get on it right away. I'd like you to switch out the silt sock with a mulch sock.
Okay,
And if your contractor can bear with it being closer to the work, that would be ideal. But now that the stockpile is on the driveway, you do want to keep it kind of running from one end to the other. But a mulch sock would be my preference. And at the end of the project, it has this webbing around it, and you just want to slice the webbing and use the mulch in your gardens. So
sounds great.
throw one out. Okay, that's all I had, Martha.
Okay, so Chuck, I'm looking at the plan and I'm thinking that especially in the upper left of the plan, that's the kind of place where you'd like to have the mulch sock curve back closer to the construction so that it's not letting the soil run off into the neighbor's property. Is that the kind of thing you're talking about?
Yeah, I don't think a lot of, is this, Dave, is this infiltration system, is this proposed? So you're gonna be digging, I don't know how much room they need around that to do the digging, but you wanna be something there, that shape? because-
Okay,
And so it's not, Martha's talking about this section, how it heads in that direction. You may not get any erosion on your project, but typically it's cupping the project, so it channelizes or contains any erosion within the erosion control.
okay. No problem. I can make sure, I'm noting that on the plans now, and I'll review that with the contractor and the site surveyor.
Okay. All right. I think, one of our concerns for this vote is, should this really be a notice of intent rather than a RDA? And so with a notice of intent, we would usually get a stamped plan by an engineer, and you do have a stamped plan. With an RDA, we're limited to the number of conditions we can put on this plan. So I'm gonna put this out to the members of the commission. Do you feel like there are enough conditions we would need to put onto this that we might need to bump this from a RDA to a notice of intent? Brian. Oh, actually, let me start with Andrew because he hasn't talked yet.
Thanks, Martha. And I know the plan is gone and I didn't have the plan in front of me when the site visit, but just staring at it, and since no one else raised it, it looks like the wetland goes into the yard and is currently existing grass in portion of it. I mean, from the wetland delineation, I don't recall that. Is that?
Yeah, that's correct. The whole backyard is
Is it?
grass. Yeah. It's all grass going up to the rock wall in the back.
So we have designated wetland as existing grass. Okay,
Looking at the plan, Andrew, I don't see where oh, I see. Yeah. Over near wetland flag 4A and 3A is what you're talking about, those wetland flags are on the lawn.
yeah,
Okay.
I clearly did a bad site visit. Sorry.
Yeah. I don't remember particularly worrying about that at the site visit either. We were looking along the stone wall
Yeah,
and I was assuming that, because I have a note that there's skunk cabbage behind that, wetland flag 5A and 4A, but maybe I was mistaken and that's actually behind the stone wall. Brian or Bill, did you make any notices of that when you were there?
I did not see any skunk cabbage inside the stone wall. The back right lawn was softer than the rest of it. I essentially blamed that on the rain we had just had, and I didn't go any further than that.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was there on Saturday before the rain, and yeah, it looked like it was described here, existing grass yard. And I saw the skunk cabbage on the other side of the fence.
Okay, so I marked it wrong on my plot plan. Okay, so back to Andrew. Having said that, do you have comments on that topic?
I guess, I mean, I would like to see more of a, not a grass. Ideally, if it is wetland, I'd like to see more wetland vegetation growing there rather than grass. That's my thought. And I guess that would easier to do as an NOI versus an RDA, but I'm not sure how others feel about that.
Are you done with that, Andrew? We can give other people a chance to respond.
That's my only comment on this project, yeah, is that little
Okay.
corner of, and I mean, obviously the cleanup, I support that as well, but this question of the grass that is designated as wetland or delineated as wetland rather.
Okay. All right. I'm also just trying to figure out if the debris is behind the stone wall, who actually owns the property on the other side of the stone wall? Does your property go back beyond that, or is the stone wall your property boundary?
The stone wall is our property boundary. I believe it's Van Norden from when we had an arborist out for a tree that needed to be taken. Yeah, someone who lives on Van Norden. I'm not even sure the exact address, but
All
If
right.
I remember correctly, I think it was 100 Van Norden at the time. This is a tree we had taken down probably 7 years ago.
it's a tree that was falling down in the wetland area, and an arborist came out and helped us coordinate to get it down.
Okay. All right. Brian, you've had your hand up.
Yeah, I was gonna go back to the original question of RDA versus NOI. And since I was one of the original ones who was wondering whether it should be NOI, I just wanted to say that given the homeowner's willingness to do the cleanup that we've talked about and to do it essentially right away, I'm comfortable with it staying as an RDA. I know the big difference there is always the conditions. Those would have been my main conditions and they're going to be addressed. So I'm fine with an RDA.
Okay. All right. So that takes us back to Andrew's question, whether normally that 25-foot line where you have marked it on your map, we would like to see native vegetation and not just lawn all the way up to that 25-foot line. For existing properties, we don't ask people to fill that entire 25-foot line, but I think Andrew has a really good point that if the wetland line really does go across that back corner of your yard, whether you would be willing to consider putting some native wetland vegetation in that back part of the yard. And Chuck has a place on the website which has a list of the kinds of vegetation you could pick from: shrubs, trees, etc.
Sure, yeah, we have there's no issue with that, with adding. It would probably help with, making it look a little nicer back there anyway, so.
Okay. Bill?
Yeah, that's actually great if you're willing to do that. I was going to say, for all we know, that's been grass. We don't know how far back it goes. So it's great that the homeowner is willing to do that, but I think we have to be careful not to assume that this homeowner had converted it in some way. It could have been grass for decades, for all we know. Just wanted to make that point. Thanks.
Yeah, I think my comment was not to assume that it has been converted by the homeowner, especially with the stone wall around the two edges of the property that looks like somebody designated that was how big the lawn should be. Which is why I'm not suggesting we fill in all the way up to the 25-foot line. But,
Sure.
Something to ease that transition back there where we have wetland flags marking that corner of the lawn really could be wetland property. Okay, Chuck, any comments on any of this discussion?
I think it was a good point. Appreciate Andrew for bringing that up. Typically, yeah, you wouldn't see lawn in a wetland resource area, but I can imagine that the homeowners didn't know what existed down there if they bought the house when, with it in its current condition. I also think it's a good idea to reclaim some of that, if not all of it, the vegetated area, but I would ask the commission just to define what they're looking for native vegetation and what it would look like during course of tonight's meeting.
Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, I think the homeowners can decide in terms of specifics of what it looks like, but I think like that we ask some native plants be placed there. I don't think we need to like number the like high bushes or high blueberry bushes or any number of this like that, but that area that is delineated, flag 5A through flag 3A as wetland, if we could get native vegetation growing in that area, and then how they want to buffer it from there to their lawn. I mean, that's up to them, right? However they want to handle that.
So could I suggest something along the lines of 2 trees and 6 shrubs, something like that? And they could be, spread out in a way that the homeowners like, and they could put together the planting plan and present it to Chuck. If there are members of the commission that think that that's not a good number, I would be happy to modify that proposal. And also, does that sound reasonable to the homeowners?
Yeah, we can plant whatever is agreeable here. Is there a certain I know you mentioned 5A to 3A. Is it expectation to fill that entire plan or just be able to spread those native plants in that area and then just have a border between the two?
I don't think the number I have proposed would fill that entire area.
Mhm.
Okay,
But it would give you some vegetation in that area.
okay.
And, you know,
And would mulch be appropriate or should it be a certain type of filler in the, for the actual top layer?
um,
No mulch.
yeah, I was picturing leaving the grass that's there
Okay,
and planting the shrubs and trees in among the grass. And then maybe as they get bigger, leave the leaf litter underneath them rather than blowing all the leaves and raking and mowing all the grass right under them.
okay,
So you could start out with grass and then it could eventually fill in as leaf litter layer underneath your shrubberies.
okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
Yeah, generally, like if you planted red maples, you'd want them like 15 to 25 feet apart from each other. You don't want to put them too close together. And then the shrubs can be closer together than that. So you can kind of fill in with shrubs underneath your tree canopy. Oaks are nice to have a high wildlife value tree. So you could do an oak and a red maple or, you know, your choice off of Chuck's list.
Mhm. Thank you.
Bill.
Yeah, so to answer Dave's question, no, I don't think the proposal here is to fill in the whole area. I think that I actually like Martha being specific. The 2 trees, 3 shrubs, and eventually the area evolves naturally, as opposed to you feeling that you have to somehow fill all this in from the get-go. So this is by way of supporting Martha's concept. I think that's a good compromise here. Thanks.
Andrew had his hand up and it went down. Did you have something you were looking to say, Andrew?
I put it back up now. I was skeptical at first when you said the specific. I mean, that's so much more helpful to be specific like that. So I could get behind. What did you say though? 2 trees and how
I
many
said
shrubs?
2 trees and 6 shrubs was my proposal.
Okay. I mean, because I was also picturing flowers and grasses and things like that. But that's why I was going to leave it up to them. But yeah, so if we like the idea of 2 trees and 6 shrubs as a commission, then I could get behind that.
Okay, Walter, you've got your hand up.
If they're going to leave grass, should they not treat it with chemicals or any other kind of insect killers?
Definitely not. Yeah.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, and it could even not be mowed, kind of up to them how they allow it to transition. But they wouldn't have to mow under their shrubs. Tony.
I would just recommend that considering how close we are to the house in terms of where we're talking about the plantings, maybe avoid some of the taller tree species. I could see that being a problem, not immediately, but down the road, having a tall tree in a wet area with a relatively shallow root zone, it may become a little bit of a hazard during a windstorm or a blowdown of landing a little too close to the house.
Okay.
Thank you for that. I wouldn't have thought of that, but thank you.
Okay, Brian.
I would just suggest that since we're in violent agreement, maybe it's time to get to a motion.
Okay. Do you have a motion?
I do. I'd like to make a motion for a negative determination for 37 Colburn.
Do we have a second?
This is
This is
Andy. I'll
John.
second that. Oh,
Go ahead, Andy.
I'll second that. Andy.
Brian Rowe in favor?
Do we want to talk conditions for Chuck to write down before we vote?
I have 2 trees, 6 shrubs, and mulch stock.
And clean
That's
up
all.
debris. Chuck, right? You get to the debris removal too?
Yep, clean up the debris.
All right, so that's 3 conditions.
Okay, and they were planning the soil stockpile to be on the driveway.
So the
Get
only thing
tucked
that
into the mulch sock line.
Yeah, mulch stock following the topography of the yard.
Chuck,
Sure. So the only thing I would add to this planting is to, to have the grass out there and the trees. You probably should do, maybe some ferns, shrubs, and trees, and try to create a habitat, and try to improve on the lawn, not just to add some trees to the lawn. I know there's a stone wall in between, but I think that it would work in really well. So maybe that could be considered to try to get herbaceous layer, shrub layer, and then the tree layer. And then just remember for the applicants that it's a wetland. So red maple would work, although we did have a suggestion not to plant, large trees. So maybe silky dogwood or something like that. But it's a wet area and you're going to have to find plants that are tolerant. We do have that list and you can just look at that section of the list.
so when we are making that a condition that they need to put some of these plants in the backyard, can the condition include that they run their planting plan by Chuck before they purchase the plants?
It's fine with me as long as everyone agrees.
Okay. Tony, you've got your hand up?
Yes, Chuck, I just wanted to ask or clarify that when you drew your red line across the plan, that you were specifically putting it closer to the house outside of the 35-foot buffer zone. You wanted to keep any impacts out of that 35-foot zone?
So it's in all reality, I'm not concerned because it's lawn where it goes. I just wanted to have, my request was to have it, the contractor to move it as close as they possibly could and have it shaped in that U shape. The 35-foot for temporary disturbance, if they get out that far, and if it's needed, I would be okay with, but I wouldn't want any disturbance past the 25-foot area. So it certainly looks like there's room because in my opinion, you need 10 to 15 feet around your project. And so you probably have more than that. Yeah.
Okay, so are we comfortable with these conditions?
Yes.
I don't hear any objections at this point, so
we should vote.
there's a motion for negative determination, which is what would be needed to allow the project to proceed.
This is Brian Bob in favor.
This is Bill McCants in favor.
Andrew Driven in favor.
John Sullivan in favor.
Martha Moore in favor. Okay. Oh, did we need to close the hearing before we had the motion on the result on the negative determination?
Typically close the hearing.
Oh,
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
yeah. All right. So anybody want to make a motion to close the hearing so we make sure we've got everything done properly?
This is Brian. I'll make a motion to close the hearing on 37 Colburn.
This is Andy. I'll second that to keep it simple.
Brian Bowe in favor.
Bill McCants in favor.
Andrew Driven in favor.
John Sullivan in favor.
Martha Moore in favor. Okay, so we have closed and issued a negative determination for this 37 Colburn.
We went back in time.
All right,
Thank
not
you.
quite the order we were supposed to do it in, but we've covered all our bases now. Okay, thank you,
Thank you so
David and
much.
Julie for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you,
so
everyone.
much. Nice to see everybody.
Okay. Our next hearing is 37 Covey Hill Road. And, so it's another 37. Chuck, if you let them in, I'll read our blurb. Open the
Sure.
public hearing on a request for determination of applicability filed by Michael Rishton under the Massachusetts Wetland Protection Act, MGL, Chapter 131, Section 40, and/or the Reading Wetland Protection Bylaw, Section 7.1. The applicant proposes to remove the existing 12 by 20 foot deck and replace it with, I believe it's a 16 by 22 foot deck on existing lawn. 7 footings will be placed for support. Spoils will be removed from the site. Erosion control fencing will be installed and the driveway will be used for access and stockpiling. All of the work is within the buffer zone to a bordering vegetated wetland. The application and plans can be viewed during regular business hours at the Town Hall Conservation Office and on the Conservation Division page under Current Project, Assessors Map 38, Lot 48, RCC file number 2023-11. Okay,
Hi, Kim. Is there anyone else with you tonight?
No, good evening. I'm standing in for my parents, Michael and
Okay.
Janet Rishton.
Sure.
okay. Welcome, Kim.
Thank you, Martha.
All right, do you want to give us a brief description of what you're planning to do?
And
So
I'm sorry, could I
basically-
get Kim's last name just for the?
Rishton. So just to clarify, there was a typo up there on the plan. It's 16 by 22, not 18 by 22. And previously, it was 20 by 12. So they're increasing the size of the deck to be more safe. It's been there since the home was built, but there were no footings. This is going to put footings in it, and this is moving the stairway around away from the door, which it's been right next to the door that comes out of the house. So it's actually very unsafe. And it's basically, so it's a replacement. That's all.
Okay, I believe somebody went out on Saturday and a bunch of us went out on Monday morning. So is there somebody who was at the site who wants to start describing what we saw?
Anybody else want to go, or should I step into the breach?
If you're pretty good at it, Brian, so go ahead, but I'll fill
Okay.
in if I want to add. This one,
So we went there, Kim took us out back. So what we saw was, well, first of all, the property goes far back, well beyond any involvement with the project area. There is a stone wall and there is a stream leading towards the stone wall. One of the first things we did was to try and understand where the stream actually started and what the ground was essentially at the base of the stone wall, between the stone wall and the stream. We did that with Chuck's auger. We measured from the proposed extent of the deck out towards that stream to determine just how far away it was. We did discover that the ground just beyond the stone wall is in fact wet. And the stream starts essentially right after a large tree that's out there. It almost looks like the stream springs from the tree. One thing of note is that there are a few areas with significant leaf deposits. One towards the right-hand side of this, to the right of beyond where the stone wall ends, and then a good distance further back. I think that's the main thing to talk about in the project area. If you go back further, Kim showed us where there was an old stable foundation where the corral used to be. There's a large pile of brush much further back to the right, which Kim states is from a neighbor. I think the neighbor actually is 544 Franklin Street. I'm not positive about that. And I think that's a overall summary.
All right, I just want to point out that I measured from the deck to the stone wall that Brian mentioned, and it was 39 feet from the deck to the stone wall. And there is another plan that Chuck shared with us that had some more details drawn into the plan, including the perhaps the stream bed and some marking 54 feet from the deck to that potential stream bed. But I don't think that's critical to the decision making. More importantly, you know, the closest the wetland line would be the stone wall, and that is 39 feet from the corner of the proposed deck. Okay. And one other thing, just to comment, I noticed that out sort of midway between the place that says lot 11 and the shed, there's a large patch of an invasive plant called garlic mustard. And that's something that is blooming now and is easily located, and it's a invasive plant that alters the soil. So if the homeowner had interest in keeping that out, this is the time of year to pull those. And it's a pretty pesky invasive plant. It's something that takes persistence to keep it from spreading. Okay, anybody want to make comments on the project? Bill?
Actually, first, just a question, Martha, if I'm just looking at the plot map that was up, about where did you see the garlic mustard invasive?
Do you see where the shed is?
Oh, yes.
And then about as far back as the shed, but kind of coming straight back from the proposed deck, kind of out in that area.
Yep.
There's a big patch of it.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just trying to get a visual on it, having seen it on Saturday. And also, one can't control the slope of the property, but I was actually very pleased to see how relatively flat it was in terms of any work being done in this area. You'd want the usual safeguards, but it didn't seem to me that this project was going to present the kind of risk that sometimes occurs when you have a steeper slope. But that was my only other comment.
Okay. Anybody else with comments? Andrew?
Yeah, I'll keep it brief. I think the deck seems like it's, as you said, we measured from the proposed deck to that wall. It's about 40 feet. So I think the project itself is fine, but it does seem like beyond that wall, we are looking at wetlands. So if there's any future projects in mind, definitely we'll have to probably get it delineated and figure things out from there. But for what's being requested, it all seems like we're dealing with a relatively straightforward project.
Okay. Anybody else on the commission with comments? I don't see anything listed on the plan for mulch sock or other erosion control during the project. Chuck, do you think that would be a good thing to add to this project?
Yeah, so I was going to ask how the footings were going to be installed. Are they just dug and poured, or is it precast? And the machinery that would be used to do that. Kim, do you know if any of those
I
answers?
believe, I'm sorry, I believe just dug and poured.
Yeah, so that's very local, disturbance. I guess with this one, for the fact that it doesn't need, erosion control is nice. If you want to require erosion control, I would say straw wattle for this one, or none, and just leave it as if some erosion started to happen. I got concerned that I could ask or request that they install that. I think that would only be an issue if it was a lengthy project and it wasn't done really quickly.
Okay, I'm comfortable with that. Erosion control added at the request of the administrator if he feels it's needed. Are you comfortable with that, Kim?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. All right. And I note that in the description of the work, the driveway will be used for access and for stockpiling, and that the spoils will be removed from the site. So there shouldn't be piles of dirt there needing erosion control over a long period of time.
Right,
Okay.
yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, and actually it does say erosion control fencing will be installed, but it's not drawn on the plan. So it sounds like Chuck feels fencing would be overkill. And if the project is done relatively quickly, straw wattle would be sufficient, if anything.
Yeah.
Okay.
It can be monitored. It's a couple of holes, shovel dug holes. I don't think there should be too much of an erosion issue.
Okay. All right. So I'm just reading the description again and noticing that it did say fencing, but we're not going to do fencing. Okay. This is a RDA. Are there any other members of the commission or Chuck with anything we haven't covered yet? Brian?
Yeah, it's not exactly something not covered. I mentioned it, but I would want a condition that the leaves to the right of the property, the pile closest to the house, be removed. Well, first of all, please ask your brother to stop adding to it. But
I don't want, I'm sorry to interrupt. So I think I mentioned this to Martha. Our neighbors have a yard service and they just blow it. They don't remove the leaves. Where my brother tends to have areas out back that he takes the leaves, and they do burn when it's the right time of year. But I do believe that's much of that is coming from the neighbors, which is why it's on that side right next to their fence.
that's fine. I was just pointing at him for the fun of it. That's not really pertinent. But but those leaves there do need to come out, whether they're yours, whether next door, whether whatever. And when it comes to doing that, you don't need to try and get it down to the original ground. You need to go down a few layers till you see where the leaves are showing more decomposition.
Mhm.
So you don't have to get it down straight bare ground. I don't know how long they've been there, but I suspect that there's multiple layers. So
There were a lot of trees out there over time. There are many of, as you can see, have aged and dropped. So they've had to been, he does his best to clear it. And like I said, they do burn when they, when it's when staying within the guidelines of burning in Reading. But yeah, as the trees thin out, there's less leaves out there for sure. Because it was much more wooded before the past 40 years or so.
The tree I was most particularly concerned about is close to the stone wall. And I think I pointed it out to you, Kim, where the base of the tree is buried, and that's going to cause the trunk to rot. And then you're going to have another tree falling down.
Right.
In fact, there's already a area of the bark that's showing separation. So that's only going to get worse.
Yeah. So that's the most important areas to be concerned about, is where you are threatening trees by having leaves piled up against the tree trunks.
Okay.
And if the neighbors are blowing their leaves onto your yard, you need to point out to them that your tree might fall onto their house. They can stop
On
doing
their
it.
pool, their built-in pool.
Okay, whatever it takes
Yeah.
to get them to not blow their leaves against your tree.
Okay, Martha, that was the only comment I had.
Okay, anybody else with questions or comments? All right. And I forgot to ask for public comment at our last hearing. I think I'm rusty or something tonight. Are there any members of the general public that needed to have a comment about this particular project? Or feels insulted that I didn't ask for it at the last project? If you do, use the reaction button at the bottom and use the raise hand feature so I can see that you have questions or comments. Seeing none, can we have a motion to close this hearing? Oh, Chuck.
Yeah. So I just wanted to know if I wanted the commission to discuss a time frame for removing the leaf debris, because it would help me understand about the inspections needed, or if I need to tie it into occupancy or anything like that.
Let me take a stab at that. Kim, when is this project supposed to kick off?
As soon as possible, because they can't use their back door, and my mother is a fan of hanging her clothes out, so that the sooner it's in a safe deck, the sooner they can get use of it again.
So then if we said that the leaves should be removed in 2 weeks, would that make sense to you? Could that be done?
I believe so.
Okay, then I would suggest 2 weeks if everybody else is fine with that.
Sure. So for me, I would just have that as my final inspection, something to look at, which is probably longer than 2 weeks, but just to let you know.
And when they remove the leaves, can we recommend the compost center is open this time of year for people to drop off leaves? Does anybody know?
And Walter's saying yes.
Yep.
So is Tony.
Okay.
Yes. So yes.
Okay, all right. I knew that there were 2 pickup dates that have already come and gone. But if they can get them to the compost center will take them still. Okay. All right, so condition to remove the leaves within 2 weeks. Put down straw wattle if Chuck requires it. And any other conditions that we didn't mention yet. Those were the 2 biggies. Okay, can we close this hearing?
This is Brian, make a motion to close the hearing for 37 Covey Hill.
Before Martha, you mentioned the garlic mustard. Did you want to put that in there as a condition, or are you just kind of making them aware of it?
I just wanted to make them aware of it. I think that's a big condition to put on somebody to put a deck
Putting it
in.
back, yeah.
But, you know, just, it was an educational thing. It's a good idea for them to keep that garlic mustard from spreading, but I'm not going to make them have to take it all out in order to build their deck.
Okay, with that said, I will second Brian. It was a motion to close, right, Brian?
Mhm.
Yes,
I'll second that.
Brian Bowe in favor.
Yes, in favor.
Andrew Driven in favor?
John Sullivan in favor.
Martha Moore in favor. Okay, next motion.
This is Brian, make a motion for the negative determination for 37 Covey Hill.
And that motion will allow the project to move forward. Okay. Do we have a second?
This is Bill McCants, I'll second.
Brian Bowe in favor.
Bill McCants in favor.
Andrew Driven in favor?
John Sullivan in favor.
Martha Moore in favor. Okay, thank you, Kim,
Thank
and
you.
good luck with your deck.
Thank you.
Okay. Our next project is 2 Maple Street. And Chuck, if you can let the applicant in, I will read the blurb. Open the public hearing on a notice of intent filed by John Sideropoulos pursuant to Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, the Wetlands Protection Act, and/or the Reading Wetland Protection Bylaw, Section 7.1, for the construction of a stone patio and placement of a utility shed. All of the work is within a buffer zone to a bordering vegetated wetland. The application and plans can be viewed on the Conservation Division page under Current Project Assessors Map 16, Lot 111, DEP file number 270-0748. Okay.
All right, are you guys ready for me?
Sure thing.
All right, Chuck, I did want to point out that my client, the homeowner, John Sideropoulos, is on as well. I'd ask if you could admit him as well as a speaking member of this party.
And yes, he already has permissions, but he
Oh,
hasn't
perfect.
turned on his video or
Oh,
unmuted
no worries,
himself.
as long as he's in. Okay.
Sure, John, Dave, I'm sorry. I just wanted to ask, do you want me to share the screen, or do you feel like you want to share the screen for the
If you don't mind me
presentation?
sharing screen, I'm sure you have the same plan you do, but I could drive around a little bit.
That's fine.
Details. All right. Well, let me introduce myself for the record. My name is David Cowell. I'm a senior wetland scientist with Hancock Associates. Here tonight on behalf of John Sideropoulos. He's the property owner at 2 Maple Street. We filed a notice of intent and request to permit a stonescape patio and placement of a shed in the backyard of a single family home. I would describe this as a very small scale project with a big request for waivers from the 35-foot no disturb due to the lot size and configuration, which I was hoping to talk about with the commission tonight. Let me share screen. Let me see if I can site plan, share. All right, let me know if everybody can see this. Can anybody?
Yes, we can see it now.
All right, good. Okay, great. So just all right, I'm just going to scroll up a little bit. Maple Street is up here. This is the frontage to the road, the front yard, the house. There's a backyard. In the back of the house is where we're proposing to do the work. Now, this is it's a fairly modest house on a fairly constrained lot in terms of size. When John came to us, he told us that he wanted to construct a deck on the back of the house and put a shed somewhere in the backyard. Let me start with the resource area. So there's bordering vegetated wetland down here, just off property. Here's the property line itself. Now, this house in the yard was constructed in 1956, and it's, I guess, grandfathered, or the formal term is existing non-conforming. The 35-foot no disturb setback is up here, and you can see that part of the building had been constructed back in 1953, and all of this was done prior to enactment of the Wetlands Protection Act or the town bylaw imposing these constraints. The entire backyard is it's maintained as turf lawn. It has been since 1953. When John came to us and asked for the deck, we looked at zoning setbacks. So there's a zoning setback. If you can see my cursor that scrolls around this perforated line here. We wouldn't be able to do the deck without, it's considered a building structure. So we would have to go to zoning and request a zoning waiver to do that. So John scaled back his proposal and said, what if I did a stonescape patio in the lawn? And that's what our proposal is today. So that's not a structure. We wouldn't have to go to zoning. It's not considered a building. So we could get it to the building without considerations of that setback. And then there's the proposed shed. This wouldn't require, it's fairly minimalistic if you consider wetland, the interest for wetland protection and what the scale of work is. You'd be taking lawn, there's no grading. They would strip the sod, they would, it's not grading, but they would just blade pit and mount topography at the top so it's flat, and then set the stonescape on top of it, and that would be it. Stonescape pavers are considered semi-pervious, not necessarily impervious surface areas that affect stormwater. The water hits this and infiltrates in between the cracks and the seams. It doesn't really sheet flow or impact infiltration. if it is at the commission's discretion, if they wanted impervious or pervious pavers, that's something my applicant would consider. Right now, we're proposing conventional bluestone pavers. The location of the shed, we're really in a hard place for where we can locate it. And, you know, the first comment is that why would the shed be so close in proximity to the wetland? Is there opportunity elsewhere on the lot? And we looked at that, and unfortunately, we didn't see another place we could put it. We looked at putting it up here, the shed, to get as far away from the wetland as we can. But there's only like a 5-foot setback from edge of property, and his driveway comes here. This is his access to his backyard. And anything up here also needs to maintain a setback from the building itself, would impede any access to his back there. And we looked at putting it up here as well, and there are site constraints between, again, it's setback lines that put us in the backyard. The only reason that this is as close in proximity as it has is that it doesn't make sense to put it in the middle of a yard, and it's a previously altered footprint that, you know, that it would just be set in place there. So again, it wouldn't entail any grading. It wouldn't entail any removal of native vegetation that's there today. It would just be conversion of lawn to stonescape patios. Now, in consideration of a waiver request, and that we're asking to be in the 30-foot no disturb zone, we were kicking the tires on what we may afford in compensatory mitigation that may, you know, maybe the Conservation Commission would consider what we could offer. Chuck visited the site with us about a year ago, and we just kicked the tires on some things that we could offer. And unfortunately, there's not much he has to offer on his lot. I usually look for areas that are degraded or have invasive species that we can remove and do a enhancement plan or a restoration plan. But he doesn't have anything on his property per se. Now, John does abut town-owned conservation land on the other side of this. In this wetland here, there's an area of Japanese knotweed. What we would ask is if the town would entertain some mitigation commensurate with the size of our project to be performed on town land, conservation land, where John could support a small-scale project. I'm just kicking tires here, and I'm sure we'll get to discussion and deliberation by the commission, but just the square footage of patio is, I think, 530 square feet. And then, you know, if we consider the square footage of the shed, which is another 120 square feet, maybe we could offer like 600 or 700 feet of restoration someplace in town-owned land. There is also somewhere up here in the front of the property, there's a trail access that comes in off of Maple Street. John had pointed out, or Chuck had pointed out, that this was an area notorious for illegal dumping, that people were dumping material. Now, John had said that he did install a camera on the side of his house, and Chuck had asked if John may be willing to share video of people who come and go if they are doing illegal dumping. John has pointed out, though, that the town did clear some vegetation here at the entrance. And since the town cleared that vegetation and these trucks no longer have sort of a hiding spot to tuck themselves away from, John hasn't observed any dumping since that time. I don't know if the town has observed any dumping, Chuck, or if you guys have seen any. But again, even at the trailhead where this is, there's a really degraded area that's strife with invasive species that, again, if the town would entertain, we could carve out a 500 or 600 square foot footprint to remove invasive species and provide a native planting plan to replant it with native species and native seed mixes to the benefit of the town. So with that, I'll turn it over to the Conservation Commission for questions and deliberation.
Okay, again, people went out and looked at this property and nobody was home at the time we looked other than a dog. Made himself or herself known, but only because we could hear the barking. is there anybody from the commission who wants to comment on what we saw? Bill,
So when I went on Saturday, actually, John was there, as was the dog, young dog, very enthusiastic. And what I saw was certainly consistent with what Dave just described. This is a very small property and basically a straightforward lawn with fencing, as you all know who went out, directly adjacent to the Pinevale area. And so then I was looking at our local regs just to sort of frame this. As we heard tonight and saw in the materials, there was a consideration of reasonable conditions, alternatives, mitigating measures proposed. I think it's important to keep in mind when a variance is requested. One of the things is the overriding interest, but we have to bear in mind when it's a single or two family residence, it's mitigation which improves the resource area quality that may be considered to accommodate the public interest. I realize this can be read a lot of ways, and I know this is no longer on the table. I'm not sure that a camera
Right.
would necessarily squarely fit in with mitigation, which improves the resource area quality, but the Japanese knotweed project and so forth, it seems to me, at least, is more consistent with what we have in our local regs as constituting a accommodation of the public interest. So that's what I have. Thanks.
Thank you.
Brian,
Yeah. First, let me comment on the dumping beyond the entrance to Pinevale. When we were there the other day for the site visit, we did stroll back there a bit. And while to a certain extent it was better, there was some evidence of relatively recent new items. For example, there was some gourds, which probably came from last fall, and there was some other loose material that looked fairly recent. Not as bad as it used to be. I think it's better, but there was some relatively new stuff. Now, as far as the shed, I recognize you're talking about the constraints on the property. However, I think there are some things you could do to address that. Not incumbent on me to do a design for you or anything, but I think you could adjust the size of it if you wanted. And I think you could move it forward, and that might require you to get a variance from the zoning board. But from my perspective on the Conservation Commission,
Yep.
I'd rather get a variance from them than from us.
Right. Yep.
Now, as far as the mitigations, the improvement of the quality of the resource area, I am intrigued by the idea of doing something with the invasives. I think we would need to have some details such as how much square footage you're considering addressing. And also the Japanese knotweed is persistent, to use Martha's word from earlier.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Yeah.
And so doing a one-time treatment isn't going to cut it, if you pardon the pun.
Nope.
So I'd like to see something longer term. So it'd have to be of significant size and significant duration to actually make it worth even considering using that as a mitigation for the patio. I think those are the main things for now. I think probably droned off enough. I don't know if you want to speak to any of that or.
Yeah, I could, you have some great comments. So, speaking again to the Cameron dumping out there again, that I don't recognize it really as mitigation. It was Chuck had mentioned it as a possible thing to throw in there. But again, I think mitigation should be vegetative and ecological in nature and not necessarily enforcement. It was just something on the table. In terms of the shed, yes, unfortunately, I was working with one of my surveyors who did the analysis on this in terms of what the setbacks and constraints were in other areas of the lot. She's not with us tonight. I can certainly go back to her and ask for an alternatives analysis of can we get in there? I would have to talk to my client about whether or not he would live without the shed before going to zoning for a variance. That could be somewhat draconian. But yeah, and again, we can maybe look at reduced footprint too. Maybe instead of a 10 by 12 shed, he can live with the 8 by 10 shed and just shrink it a little bit. So these are all on the table. In speaking to the ecological restoration, I didn't give a restoration plan with the proposal. The guidance I had given my client was that, given the fact that we're asking for a waiver and that you guys may outright deny us, was that let's open the public hearing tonight, get feedback from the commission in terms of whether or not you guys would entertain it. If you guys said this was dead in the water, I could spare my client the expense of putting together a restoration plan. But if it's something the commission is at least entertaining, then that gives us assurance that I could move forward with a restoration plan of some nature. Again, I've always done restoration plans on our property. I don't know what terms would apply if the this is certainly to the benefit of both parties. But how to, Chuck, I don't know if you have any idea of how we could corroborate to maybe do some survey on your side and put together a planting plan. Again, it's something, I don't know where liability falls or stuff like that. It's all with best intent to remove invasives and plant it with natives to create habitat, as Chuck said. Preferred, as you implied, the Japanese knotweed, I don't want to touch that. I'd prefer to, if this is 500 or 600 square feet of work, to give you 500 or 600 square feet closer to the trailhead where there's a degraded area that is, I had some site photographs, but it was, the town, I think, cleared some of the vegetation, but didn't replant it, and it's sort of regrowing with invasive species, and it just looks really degraded. I would be able to put together specifications for removal of, and these are easier to treat than Japanese knotweed, and you implied. That's really, really hard to work with. Up here, it would be multiflora rose or Asiatic bittersweet, or species that are, I don't want to say manageable, but more manageable than knotweed. Put together a native planting plan, complete with native seed specs and herbaceous species, and offer that. So that's where we were headed with it.
Okay, so if I can jump back in there.
Yep, please
So
do.
From my perspective, at least, the shed placement size, the shed issue is a non-starter for me. That brings us to the patio. Patio, I could see my way towards approving if there was sufficient mitigation. I did say the Japanese knotweed was intriguing, and it is. You're talking about doing something up front where it was cleared is also interesting to me. So in either one of those cases, I would say I'm open to you coming back with a plan. And if the plan is sufficient in size and what have you, then I would consider that as a acceptable mitigation for the patio. But again, for the shed, no, the shed's gonna move up or smaller or both.
All right. This is all your comments are helpful. This is exactly the type of feedback I was hoping to get from members tonight. Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna jump in before I call on Walter. Sorry, Walter. I just want to make a comment that I haven't heard anybody else bring up that we noticed when we were on our site visit. Skunk cabbage is an indicator species of wetland.
Yep.
And we located the flags for the border, the wetland flag line. But I noticed that there was significant skunk cabbage within the property
beyond the wetland
compared to
line.
the line. So
Okay.
how long ago was that wetland line delineated?
That was done last late summer. Usually we carry the date on the site plan. Let's see if we actually have it on here. Limits of bordering land. Oh, it was a fall delineation. I did use the soil auger a lot on this one because it was turf lawn at the edge of wetland. So I was looking at soils more than I was looking at vegetation at
Okay.
that point in the year.
And you're the
Happy to
one who
come back
did
and
that
revisit.
delineation?
Yep,
Yeah.
that was my delineation. Yeah.
Okay, because at the moment, where you have the shed drawn on the plan,
Yep.
there are 2 skunk cabbage leaf clumps between the shed and the property boundary of the neighbor, Murphy. So, you know, I agree with Brian that that's really not an appropriate place to put a shed if there's
Okay.
skunk cabbage growing in the area where you're talking about putting a shed.
Okay.
And there also is skunk cabbage just off the property, but inside wetland flag A100, and there's skunk cabbage inside wetland flag A104.
Okay.
So, you know,
How prevalent is the skunk cabbage? Is it a dominant species, or are there other species that are growing with it, or is it just, you know, there's going to be outliers. There's going to be, you know, it's dominance of wetland vegetation. If it is, you know, hundreds of skunk cabbage coming up behind it, in any case, I'm happy to go back out there and look at it and revisit it. But yeah. But it has to be dominant. So if there's 2 bunches of skunk cabbage in a lawn, that's not necessarily dominance.
Okay, I would say the 2 corner areas near wetland flag A100 and A104. My memory was that was pretty heavily skunk cabbage.
Okay.
Yeah, the 2 lone outliers up near where your proposed shed. If you're saying it has to be dominant skunk cabbage to be a wetland, that probably would not count as dominant. They were just random separate clumps.
Yeah.
But
yeah, these are where wetlands abut manicured lawn can be challenging. That's where the soils come in. But again, I did this in November, relying on soils, but I have no aversions to revisiting the site and adjusting our flags accordingly. If now that vegetative species emergence has come out, that I can nudge these lines to reflect that.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I think I'm going to agree with Brian that I would need to see the shed moved outside the 35-foot zone.
Yeah.
And if you have to nudge the wetland line, that nudges where the shed can be that
Yeah.
much closer to the street. And I used my handy dandy ruler and the scale on your plan and measured from your existing wetland line to the corners of the proposed stone patio.
Yep.
And I measured that at the closest corner, it would be about 15 feet from the wetland line. And at the farthest corner, it would be 21 feet from the wetland line. So both of those take it within the 25-foot zone, which is supposed to be zone of natural vegetation.
Yeah. And sorry, forgive me for not asking that. I knew there was a 35-foot no disturb and a 25. I didn't know what the 25. I would have. Sorry, I didn't understand the difference between no disturb and natural vegetation and what that nuance is. Why they're not the same.
35-foot we generally consider to be no structures.
Okay.
And so
so you could
patio counts as structures.
Yeah.
So we'd need to be talking mitigation for patio even within the 35-foot zone. But 25-foot is supposed to be natural vegetation, zone of natural vegetation.
Yeah.
So,
well, I would ask the commission to consider that, again, it's existing non-conforming and he has lawn to limit of lawn. So it's lawn in the existing condition and it will remain as such even if we didn't do the patio. You're not losing any native vegetation there.
understood.
Yeah.
But I'm reluctant to, even with mitigation, have a structure go into that 25-foot zone. So I'm going to ask if Mr. Sideropoulos might possibly consider a smaller patio that would stay 25 feet from your wetland line that you've drawn. It could be like a 12 by 30 patio rather than an 18 by 30 patio, for example.
I'm just trying to, I mean, this isn't a 10-foot to scale and I'm terrible at drawing, but I'm just trying to see what a possible 25-foot line would do. So, and I don't know that's the scale, I'm just approximating 10 feet and across carrying a 10-foot offset. So, yeah, I think I think he would still want to have this squared off and not an awkward configuration, but if he were able to get down to the 25 and come across this direction, if you guys would allow a little bit of encroachment here, I could talk to him about reducing footprint in this direction. So this is the 30-foot dimension, this is the 18-foot dimension, and I could talk to him about bringing it back to, what we'll do is on our site plan, I'll have them add the 25-foot land. We'll plot where that falls in the patio, and I'll see what I can do for reduced footprint to get us to further vacate that. That's a reasonable request.
Okay, so Walter's had his hand up for a while. I will cede the floor to Walter.
You may have already answered my questions because we're thinking about moving the shed.
Yep.
But my two questions about the shed would be, what would the foundation be? And how would you handle the runoff from it?
Right. John, can you answer the question? I think you and I had talked about whether or not it was a prefabricated shed, like one that you could purchase and just set on the ground without foundation. But no, I do agree with you that if this was on like concrete foundation, that would be even more challenging and not something prefabricated that you just drop on the ground and you could move from point to point. John, are you able to unmute and
Yep. Good evening, everybody. Sorry, my camera's not working. My apologies on that. So yes, for the shed, that would be on either CMU blocks or footing for one in each corner. It would be off the ground roughly six inches to a foot, and that's how we would have the shed.
and that's how infiltration would be handled if it were elevated 6 to 8 inches off the ground. It would still be able to infiltrate beneath it. And for something that's 120, or if we reduce to 10 by 8, 80 square feet is, I don't know what your town stormwater bylaw says, but that's negligible surface area, I would think, in terms of treating stormwater runoff for a structure of that size.
Yes, so that wouldn't be covered under the stormwater bylaw for the town, but the commission does propose infiltrate all new structures runoff, but we haven't in the past ever considered a shed for that requirement.
Yeah, I mean, that it's just, and again, this is opinionated, but with it being elevated off the ground on footings such that it can infiltrate beneath it, that I think it would be draconian to have them install dry wells where 80 square feet of clean runoff from the roof. Well, I don't think it's going to erode anything or create any channels or drainage problems or anything of that nature.
Yeah.
And again, first and foremost, it's not going where we had it proposed, and we're going to try to get it out of there. So, or he may not get it at all if we find that we can't vacate the 35 foot. So it may become a moot point.
Yeah, it seems to me like you ought to be able to fit a 8-foot wide shed between the house and the 5-foot setback on the side.
Somewhere here
Up in
or-
that area.
Yep.
I was thinking over there.
Yep.
Yeah.
John, since you're on mute, I know that we had Jody with my company look at setbacks and constraints. But do you know, was there any constraints on a personal level of things on between your building and your property line that would prohibit the shed from being there?
So one of the biggest things is we have windows right there on the side of the house.
On this side?
Yeah, that's correct. So we have 2 bedrooms right there. And if we were to put it with outside of the 35-foot zone, we would be, the windows would be facing the side of the shed. You know, I am willing to look at shrinking the shed down. I understand that. You know, I'm trying to be as accommodating as possible as well. You know, I really do appreciate everybody working with us on this. But I'm trying to look at it from a feasible standpoint as well. And I don't know if putting the shed right next to the house would be feasible for us. And then I also don't know if the town would allow it as well, the building department, because there are setbacks from the corner of the house as well.
Okay,
Because our original thought was putting it actually on the opposite side of the house,
Here.
on the right over there. And we were running into setbacks from the right side of the property line to the corner of the house as well.
Right. And again, this is your driveway right here, right? That
Correct.
on the back. So, but no, but we will go back to the drawing board. I want to pull Jody, my surveyor, who's she's been the one that's reviewed zoning and building code on what other constraints pertain. But yeah, we'll look for opportunity to entirely vacate the 35 if we could. John, I don't know if you would entertain even pushing it further north. I know the corner was ideal in the context of not taking up more of your lawn space, but we'll have to go back to the drawing board on that one. That's yep. But all of your concerns are heard, and I think that between John and I and my surveyor, familiar with the building code and zoning code, we'll look to reevaluate.
I haven't heard from other members of the commission how they feel about my proposal to make the patio somewhat smaller and try to avoid the 25-foot area. So I'd like other people to comment on that before we let you go back to the drawing board. We don't want you to be chasing.
No, I'm looking for every member and their thoughts and opinions and every voice. That really aids us in going back, and you know, we essentially we came in tonight trying to decide if this was a go or no go, if it was even you know, before John invests more money in it. But
okay.
so far we're yeah.
So let me call on people one at a time who have their hands up, starting with Andrew.
Thank you, Martha, and thanks for presenting this project. It is an interesting one just because the sheer size of the home and the size of the site and how adjacent it is to the wetlands. And I think first and foremost, especially since it's an NOI, and just seeing it this past Monday, there was some definite questions about where that wetland line really might be. It seemed like it is even closer, which makes this even harder. And trust me, I understand why you want the shed where it is and why you want to add a patio. These all seem reasonable, but it just given the regulations from our point of view as a conservation commission and way we treat most of these projects, what you're asking, unfortunately, is asking for a variance. I mean, there's no way around it. It's not going to happen within the current regulations. But between a waiver and a variance, I haven't been on this that long, but I haven't seen any waivers. So I think we're really looking at a variance, is my understanding. So I'm
What's the
concerned.
difference between a waiver and a variance? You're using them as different terms.
A variance is a specific thing. You have to send a letter and it has to meet certain criteria. A waiver is asking us to say, we don't care about the regulations.
Oh, variance, yeah. No, I'm not asking you to.
Like, we're
look-
waiving the regulations for this particular situation. Because we have the ability, as a commission, honestly, we have the ability to do that. It's up to us to agree on what we want to do, but we have a commission, from my experience, have not done that. We tend to try to stick to the regulations and then ask for variances when it seems appropriate. So, I do share, Chair Moore's concern about the size of the patio. I think her suggestion of once we have the wetland delineation more determined, or if it is where it is, just trying to keep it out of the 25-foot natural zone of natural.
Yep.
Thank you. And then the shed is a tough one. Definitely not that corner, even as ideal as it is, that's where you want to place it. And on the garage side, you're even closer to the wetland. So I get that side as well. So the window side, if you want a shed, seems like your best option, just looking at it from top down, but obviously take a closer look. I know once a accessory structure gets within 10 feet of the dwelling, then it becomes a different issue, but that's not us, that's the building code and zoning code. So, but in terms of the patio, I'd like to see it smaller, just given the size of the home. The proposal seems to be asking a lot. That's a large percentage of the yard that's between almost entirely in the 25 and 35-foot buffer zone. So the size of it, I would like to consider it to be, well, I won't put that one on the table, but then I am open, especially we are right adjacent to that entrance on Pinevale. So if there's things that we could do there to be making it look nicer, I don't know how that works. Like you mentioned with Chuck, since that's not your land, but and when we're asking for a variance, that seems like a reasonable, you're not like going far away. It's basically your side yard. So as far as my point of view is how we kind of talk this through, how we could get the variance through, that seems like a reasonable way to try to get to an agreement, in my opinion.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yep. So that's really, we're looking for explicit candor from the commission if, again, in vetting, putting more money into this. So yeah, at first I was concerned, Andrew, with if it was a hard stance that we don't grant variances for things like this, and this would be denied. I'm just trying to spare my client the expense. But if it's entertained on the table, again, if we ditch the shed or get it outside of the 35, reduce footprint on the patio to further reduce footprint, and I'll plot the 25 and see to what degree we can vacate, and then offer compensatory mitigation of some form through native plantings. If it's still in the realm of consideration, then we will move forward.
Yeah, I understand. No, I get it from your point of view. We don't see too many variances come before us, but every project's different, and we have not seen in my time, past year and a half, seen a project quite like this. So I think it's
like I described at the opening. It's a small scale project on a complicated lot. That's it. Really is complicated.
Okay, let's move on to Bill.
Thank you, Andrew.
Okay. So I see this somewhat differently. First of all, looking at the Redding's Wetland Protection Regs, Zone of Natural Vegetation, bordering any wetland, the commission may, not must, may require a zone of natural vegetation. And it's true, we do that in most conditions. But I just want to be clear, it's not mandated, it's may, it's permissive. Okay, so then I think, at least how I view this, we look at the property holistically. And we ask, what's the effect on the resource area? Because that's what we're here to protect. That's what the buffer zone is all about. I see a property that's small, that's flat, and is grass. And I understand what Martha's saying about the skunk cabbage, but also what was said about dominance. Okay, this is all by way of saying when it comes to the patio, I feel differently. The patio may look big compared to the house, but this is a very small property. what I see is a possibility is, and I had mentioned this to John when I saw him on Saturday, he actually brought it up. If these were pervious, not semi-pervious, but pervious, as opposed to bluestone pavers, I personally don't see how that would have negative impact on the wetlands compared to the existing lawn. So that's my point of view. Thanks.
Thank you. And that is a point that I try to make as a consultant, is tying it back into the wetland regulations in the interest for wetland protection, which is defined right out of the gates. And there's like 8 different points. It's wildlife habitat, fisheries habitat, shellfish habitat, stormwater, flood storage, pollutant attenuation, groundwater infiltration, protection of public drinking water and supply, and there's one more and I'm forgetting it, so the tip of my tongue, but that's it. And in this case, where there isn't native vegetation being lost, there isn't grading affecting it, and I agree with you, and I think Sean would entertain impervious pavers. That's would be the only thing I would see would be stormwater, and it's small scale and it infiltrates, and if we did pervious pavers, it would completely infiltrate. So thank you, Bill, or William, that was a great point. Thank you.
All right, John's turn.
Thanks, Martha. I would like to see, I think, the 25-foot line on the map and kind of seeing how we can maybe shrink the patio or rearrange the patio to try to stay outside of that 25-foot line. I think, if I remember way back when, I think before a lot of the rest of the commissioners were on, I think we had a project that had maybe like if I remember, a deck that slightly extended past the 25-foot line, and I think we made a granted permission for that with some like additional mitigation or additional I think just mitigation. I'm wondering if maybe Martha or Chuck remember that. I think it was on Haverhill Street. Does that sound familiar?
I know there was a property on Haverhill Street where the mitigation was giving us 12 acres of property in exchange for building a house close to the 35.
Yeah, I feel like there might have been like the deck was was just over the 25-foot line, but it was a long time ago.
But there was
Haverhill Street.
Yeah, there was a lot of acres donated to that conservation land. Don't exist here, so we're having to look at something else for mitigation in this case.
But I guess just there's at least a little bit of precedent for structure or disturbance within the 25-foot, even if it's just a little bit.
Okay, good point. So yeah, that property needed a variance.
Right. Yep. So yeah, again, that's first order of business, is plotting the 25 and looking for opportunity to reduce footprint towards the house, and if we can get to 25. If I suspect the 25 line is going to come higher on this side, so like just as you implied, that maybe there'll be a corner over here that's just encroaching in the 25 by the time we scale this back. So but that's sound counsel. We'll add the 25, scale back, and see to what degree we can get there.
Andrew has his hand up.
Just a quick kind of response to Bill. I understand that it's not that different to do a patio versus grass, and grass isn't wetland, but it is organic. And what we're really talking about is habitat in the long run. The wetlands are supportive of habitat of birds and little things that grow on the ground and walk on the ground. And that's my concern. You talk to an ecologist and they are not going to look at a patio as the same as they are going to look at plants, even grass. So it is different from an ecological point of view, especially when you're this close to a wetland. So my concern specifically is wildlife habitat when you're looking at what the regs are trying to support here.
Right. I would softly refute that. I am an ecologist. I'm a certified wildlife biologist. I'm a certified ecological restoration practitioner who's been doing this for 20 years. And I don't see any benefit from turf lawn to patio in terms of wildlife habitat.
Well, one's organic and one's not. I mean, yes, it's not a wetland. I don't disagree with that, but we're one step closer to a wetland.
Okay, Bill has his hand up.
Thank you for that, Andrew. And I just like to respond that looking at the structure of both the State Wetlands Protection Act and the Reading Wetlands Protection Act, we're always balancing interests here. We're balancing, of course, the interests of the Wetlands Protection Act, but looking at how the regulations are structured both at the state and local level, we're always trying to balance the interests of the landowner as well. So that's always in the mix. Just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Yep. I think I was clear in my balanced approach as well.
Brian has his hand.
Yeah, I was going to suggest that we've gone back and forth a lot. And it's clear at this point that there's going to be at least a continuation. So let the applicant go away and decide if he wants to restructure, and if so, how, and then to come back. In the meantime, we do have other things to get to. So I would suggest we ask the applicant if they're open to a continuation.
I am, Brian. Thank you for proposing that. I think at this point we've really kicked the tires on this, and I've gotten feedback, solid feedback from all the commission members. Leaving this hearing, my marching orders are add the 25-foot disturb zone, see if I can reduce footprint on the patio to vacate the 25-foot, find a new location for the shed to vacate the 35-foot, revisit the wetland line to see if it changes at all based on the emergence of vegetation, and come back to you with another plan. And in the meanwhile, I can also vet, an area if I visit the site to go revise the wetland flags and revise our plan accordingly. I can also look at areas that we could propose as mitigation. So in general feedback from the commission, it didn't sound like this is outright denied and we don't stand a snowball's chance. So on that counsel, I think I will advise my client to move forward and invest.
Okay, so in that case, I would agree that there is some chance. I don't know how big the snowball would have to be, but there's some chance. So given that, how much time do you think you need before you would be ready to come back?
Well, I would ask the continuance to your next hearing. Is that in 2 weeks? If I find that I'm not able to reflag and get survey, I would call Chuck in advance of the hearing and just ask for continuation to the next. But I just hate to pigeonhole us into going 2 hearings out and find that we could come back. Yeah.
So given that, this is Brian, I'll make a motion that we continue to Maple Road to, what's the date of the next meeting?
May 8th. I believe it's May 8th.
To May 8th.
Okay, before you, anybody seconds, I just want to also suggest that when you're considering mitigation, given that there are some emergent skunk cabbage plants within the property boundary of the property, would the homeowner consider offering a possibility of any sort of native vegetation planting in the edge of the property back, sort of in the corner where the shed was proposed to be, for example? So you could consider that with your client when you're suggesting your mitigation.
Okay.
And Chuck has his hand up, and I want to make sure he has a chance to talk before we do any continuing.
Thanks. Yeah, this was a great discussion. Thanks to everyone participating. So I just wanted to say, John, if you were going to propose a pervious patio, could you either more formally, but I would even accept something less formal to just determine seasonal high groundwater in that area that's proposed underneath the patio?
Yep. No, that's a good point. I can even do that myself. I can go out when I have the soil auger with me while I go out to do the touch up the flags, look at restoration. I can throw the auger in the ground a few times and look for depth to seasonal high water and just record what that is.
Yeah, I just, and the only other comment that I would have is that, that entrance to Pinevale is historically abused. And, you know, to stop that from happening is a big benefit. It would be, you know, it would be appreciated by not only residents, but anybody walking those trails. But I would also ask that the homeowner would almost make a commitment to monitor that area after it's done, and to, you know, maybe walk out there 10 or 20 feet every once in a while and see if there's any new debris put out in that area, and that would help us stop this from happening. I think the entrance to the trail would be a really big addition to that Pinevale area, the Pinevale entrance. So that's all I have. I think that's where we're working. I'm not sure if you can afford to do mitigation by the shed on the property and on Pinevale. So maybe there's a desire to just have it where it's going to make the most sense.
We'll take a look at that, Chuck. In terms of ongoing monitoring on behalf of my property owner, if it was restoration, I'd suggest that you put 2-year monitoring in the terms of the order of condition. But after a point of 2 years, I don't think I think it's a little draconian to have my client in perpetuity police that area longer than 2 years, or, you know, it's to have that recorded in the registry of deeds as an order would be draconian, because it would live with the term of the property owner, right? So yeah, 2 years of monitoring.
So no, we don't have to do that. I mean, my goal is to have the homeowner to do enough work and take so much pride in it that we don't need to monitor that. I don't agree with the 2 years. I think it's up to the commission to decide on a time frame.
Yep. You guys can
Again,
throw
I
it
just
in.
did this with somebody else. 10 years doesn't make any sense. 2 years might be too less, but something in, you know, something like that. I'm not suggesting 10 years. I'm just saying, where does it make sense? And we're really talking about the establishment and the survivability of what's planted out there, and for this new entrance to take hold in the community, so everyone has a sense of pride and ownership in that entrance, and then everyone will stop preventing people from dumping there.
So Chuck, what you're describing sounds a little bit like making that entrance look like an Adopt an Island program, where somebody has actually planted plants that people would be embarrassed to dump their leaf manure on. I mean,
All I'm saying is that John's going to present a plan, and vegetation and restoration. I don't, you call it restoration or mitigation, whatever it's called, for that area. And I was only talking about how long the monitoring would happen. I mean, and I'm sure if it looked nice, people would be reluctant to go over there and continually dump. But no, it doesn't have to be I'm not asking for an adoption. I think it will organically happen in the neighborhood. There are people here to talk about this site. I'm not sure if we want to get to that.
Yeah, I didn't mean to make it be officially an Adopt an Island program, but the way it would look would be looking like somebody cared about it, as opposed to that nobody cares about it.
Mhm.
And that's what you're asking for.
Oh, yeah, sure. That's exactly what we're looking for.
Okay.
Or
So
would
are there
be
members of the general public that were here that have comments on this project? If so, use the reaction button and the raise hand function underneath that. Okay, I don't hear any. So we had a motion to continue. We're waiting for a second.
Martha, I'm happy to second. Before I do, as far as I could tell from this discussion, there was nobody on the commission who supported putting the shed where it's currently proposed, as far as I could tell. There's some There's some disagreement about the stone patio. It seems to be a strong feeling to keep it behind the 25, but I'm pretty sure nobody said that they think this shed could go there. And if I've got that right, I'm happy to second.
Okay,
So yes, I think you do have that right. And given that, Brian Bowe in favor.
Thank you.
Bill McCann's in favor?
Andrew Driven in favor.
John Sullivan in favor.
Martha Moore in favor. So we have voted to continue to May 8th.
Outstanding. Thank you so much for everybody's time and your feedback. That really does give us clear direction, and we'll see you again soon.
Thanks,
right,
you've been
David.
Great.
Thank
It's
you,
actually
everybody.
May
Sean.
10th, May
All right,
10th.
be well.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Okay,
Oh, so
Um,
just to cut in for a second, we do have Joe Guy Federa and Thor Akerley here to talk about the extension request for Lakeview and Eaton. So maybe we could move things around and get that on next.
okay. I'm happy to take that next.
We get Guy and everybody on site.
Good evening, everyone. Thor Akerley from Williams and Sparages. Guy and Joe, the property owners and project managers, are here as well from Eaton Lakeview Development. At this point, the order is set to expire in late May. I believe it was May 24th. The original permit was issued in way back in 2019. For the construction of 12 townhouses and a multi-family large apartment building on the Lakeview side of the Eaton and Lakeview intersection. If you've been out there at this point, the townhouses are essentially done. We've been monitoring the project for Guy and Joe for the past almost 4 years now. Feels crazy to say that. But they've overall done a nice job out there. They built that wall that you see along the perimeter of the project pretty early on, and we haven't really seen many issues because there really wasn't much work, done beyond that wall once it was put up. So it kind of made our lives a little easier and made it easier on them to help contain the site. I guess at this point, just so the commission knows, the last stages of the Eaton side to the townhouse side would be the final landscaping. You may have seen some of the slopes are not totally stabilized yet. There's a number of plants and shrubs and trees that are going in throughout the site in the coming weeks. Guy had said he can comment on that too. But those slopes and the plantings would be installed, and the slopes would be stabilized at that point, or more permanently stabilized. I know they had some seed, but they haven't quite taken that well. And then the Lakeview side, again, hasn't really begun yet. It is a large project, and so that's why we're requesting a 3-year extension to the order. I'm happy to answer any questions or concerns. And again, Guy and Joe are here as well.
Thor, if you don't mind, Guy sent me some pictures earlier today. I'm going to run through them. If you have any comments, just let us know. This is the site. Guy sent these things to me. I think what they're doing is they're trying to tidy up the site, general conditions of what is typically out there from the reports and from my site visits. I don't know if anyone's familiar with the site. There's the retaining wall that's in back of the units. And this is a kind of like a runoff area before it gets into maybe 40 or 50 feet before it hits Walker's Brook there. 40, 50 feet of pretty much Japanese knotweed and other invasives entangling all the trees. Here's another area of what the site looks like. As you can see, the lawn hasn't been fully established. Chain link fence in place, the silt fence looks intact. It may not be needed on the left-hand picture anymore. It's running down the back of the building along the retaining wall, and this is an outlet structure, kind of a velocity box there to make sure that there's no scouring heading into the wetland area just beyond, I guess, just beyond the erosion control, but certainly at least 25 feet into the woods there. Is a construction trailer and more of the retaining wall, the erosion control, silt fence behind that. Again, this in these areas that now that the retaining wall is up and everything is paved and we have established grass in this area, it may not be needed anymore. But it was a project that's always been monitored by Williams and Spragis and mostly by Thor. And so he's really kept a good rapport with the developer, and we've been able to ask. I assume this is the new side. I can see the wetlands coming up. This is probably where Bank of America is, up there, up on top of the Home Depot retaining wall. We're looking at 12-inch mulch sock and erosion control fence. And this is certainly along the new side where they are about to start. There's the, again, I'm going to call it the Home Depot retaining wall, but it's more by the Staples area and Oye, the restaurant. A little fill going on. This was historic fill in this area from the previous owner. And the retaining wall. And that's it. I don't know if anyone has any questions on those specific questions, but those specific pictures, but I just wanted to let you see the site and how it looks if you hadn't had a chance to get out there. And I would say it's been kept up well through Thor and through the owners and through the developers. So seeing none, I'll stop sharing so we can have our discussion.
Chuck, would you think this would be a place that we should have a site visit before we finish our vote on this question?
So this project has been pretty much managed by the Conservation Office and Williams and Spragis through Thor. And Brian went out there once when we were, I can't remember why we were out there, for compliance, or for sign off or something like that. Brian, can you help me?
We actually went out there because Guy wanted us to do a quick assessment to be sure that they were on the right track. So if there were going to be any issues, they get early attention.
Mm-hmm. I also think the timing being less than a month from the expiration date and the requirement to at least get it to the commission 30 days prior to the date of the expiration may factor in. I personally, if you haven't been out there, I don't think it's needed. The area, the townhouse area is, visibly through those pictures looks in fine condition. The whole place is, the disturbed area is protected by a retaining wall, and so nothing happens beyond the retaining wall, and that's constantly looked at. So the truthful answer to your question, I would say you do not have to continue to take a site visit because I don't believe there's anything to find, but we'll see what the rest of the commission thinks about those statements.
Okay, Bill's got his hand up.
Thank you for that info and for the pictures. I did actually go out to the site on Saturday morning just out of curiosity, walked pretty extensively through the townhome area, and these pictures you shared are just even more reassurance because I was looking at the 10.05 of the wetland protection regs, talking about the sort of things we'll look for. Is there any incomplete work causing damage to the interests identified? Doesn't appear to be the case. This is very carefully monitored, as you've shared. No work that's been done in violation of the order, obviously, again, because as you've shared, very carefully managed. But that does leave me with the final question, which may be easy to answer. And I didn't walk on this property. It's the part that hasn't been done yet. As you know, it's behind chain link fencing, a lot of work going on there. It looks like demolishing some houses and so forth. But where a resource area delineation or certification is no longer accurate, i.e. with the passage of time. Chuck, you talked about a wall, but I personally be interested in you talking a bit about how you as conservation administrator are confident that that original order of resource delineation is still accurate for the property that hasn't been built on yet.
Yeah, so most of the site and the area that they're starting construction on is a disturbed area, and volunteer vegetation has grown in beyond the rather large berm that's out there from just the I don't know, the everyday operations of moving back and forth fill from other sites. And so this berm has established itself, and beyond that, the trees. And then just beyond the trees, there's a pretty significant wetland that's been established. But in my opinion, and stream, the stream channel is deep. It's been reviewed by I was going to say Greg. Was it Greg Hockmith that did this? I'm
Yeah,
not sure.
it was.
Out of Williams and Sparagus. Extensive site visits back in the day, but there is no movement towards the undeveloped area that's being developed at this time. There's no way for the stream to move forward, or the soil makeup isn't isn't consistent enough and organic enough to actually migrate up the mounds of the berm. So I would think that not only the riverfront area is intact, but also the wetland vegetation area is also intact.
Yep, that's very helpful. And it seems to me, at least in terms of everything you presented, that would be the only thing would be a reason to have a site visit for. And there would only be a reason for a site visit if you, having a lot of knowledge of the area and the company doing the oversight, felt there had been some change, and that doesn't seem to be the case. So thank you for that.
Okay, Brian.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. The first is in the extension, you talk about needing the extra time, 2 to 3 years, to build buildings 1, 2, and 3. When I went back to the original material, it was saying that the project description was 12 townhouses, which are now done, and 2 buildings. So I don't know if there's actually a discrepancy there, if I'm reading it the wrong way, but I don't understand why in one place it said 2 buildings, and in the extension, you're talking about buildings 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah, sorry, Brian. I see why that was confusing. On the, I think I was referring to, I'm just looking at the plan right now. There were, buildings 1, 2, 3. I believe I had mistakenly called building 1 the community hall, which is the building in between buildings 2 and 3. As an additional, it is an additional building, but it's not shown as building 1. And Guy or Joe, if I'm misinterpreting that, let me know. But I think that was the intention. It is 3 structures, though, I believe.
Hey guys. So then, and this is actually, I guess, directed to you, Chuck. Is there any issue with the fact that the overall approval, if you will, is for 2 buildings and this is 3? I do understand your point, Thor, about 2 residential buildings and a community building. Is that an issue that we should correct the record on, or any thoughts on that?
So we approved the plan, and as long as that plan hasn't changed, then I would say that we're still within the order of conditions. Are you saying the order of conditions mistakenly talks
Um,
about the building?
No,
or-
I'm not saying either one is mistaken, because I frankly don't know. I was just saying I saw a difference and couldn't figure it out on my poor little self.
Yeah, from what I know, the plans haven't changed, and the commission back, I don't have the exact date. The commission at that time
I think it
approved
was
the plan
2019, I think.
that the applicants are using now. And
Guy, has his hand
Guy,
up. Maybe he can help us on this.
sure.
Good evening, all.
Okay.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi. Yes, so it has not changed. It is in fact still the same three structures that were proposed and approved. It is two 12-unit buildings on the front of the site and the 50-unit building on the middle part of the site. So that is all still the same. So there's two identical buildings and 150 unit that was proposed and approved.
Okay, I see, and I accept that. I just wanted to ask about it. And that would leave me with one more question. In your letter, Thor, it said that essentially what's been done is the 12 townhouses, and it says the roadways and parking lots and drainage and things like that. But I'm assuming you have that to do still for the as yet undeveloped side, right?
Correct. I hope in addition, I meant to, I guess I could have specified a little better, but the 12 townhouses and the construction of the drainage, parking, utilities, and landscaping with that portion of the project are done, but none of that has been done on the other side, correct?
Okay, so I just wanted to make it clear that I was expecting it, but we should be expecting that there's that kind of infrastructure yet to be built over on the other side of the site.
Yes, there's a pretty extensive drainage plan over there as well.
Yeah, I would hope so. Okay, those are just two clarifications, and given that, I'm all set, Martha.
Okay. Guy, did you have something else you wanted to add?
No, I do not. Thank you.
Okay, you can lower your hand. Okay, I just had one question after looking at all of Chuck's pictures. You say the erosion control looks like it's still in good shape and doing its job. When is the plan to remove that erosion control? Would we wait till the end of the 3-year extension to do that, or could it be removed sooner?
Yeah, so as I was going through the pictures, I felt that that retaining wall is a big deal, and it's going to prevent runoff and control runoff, and there's no sign of any erosion. So if the applicant, it might as well leave it in place. It's just been dressed up. But the next time it deteriorates, they could put in a request to have it removed. I think the townhouse side pretty much is all set. There's no activity proposed in that area. And if there is, they'd have to leave it in place in that area, or add some when they do the work. But the retaining wall is really a big factor in my decision here, but it could come out.
Okay, good.
And again, by coming out, we would slice the mulch sock, spread out the bark mulch, and remove the silt fence and whatever the media is around the mulch. Just that's all we would need to do.
Yeah, the reason I'm concerned about that is we had a site visit at a place that's had a silt fence in the woods for 20 years, and it never got taken up after the project was finished. So I just wanted to be thinking about how that works. So, okay, so the request is for a 3-year extension. Do we have a motion about this?
So this is Brian. I make a motion that we extend the order of conditions for 3 years from the current expiration date of May 2023.
Is there a second?
This
This
is
is
John, I'll
Bill.
second.
Okay, so John seconded. Okay,
Brian Bowe in favor?
Bill McCann's in favor.
Just before I'm in favor, but we'll leave it at that. Andrew Durbin in favor.
John Sullivan in favor.
Martha Moore in favor. Okay, thank you all for coming.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
All right, bye now.
Bye-bye.
Okay, we have Meadowbrook access easement vote. And Chuck, were you saying that we are not going to be able to do that this session?
Yeah, so we haven't received the paperwork from Meadowbrook yet. And so we're just going to extend this to our next meeting, which is May 10th, actually not May 8th.
Oops.
So we're going to extend it to the first meeting in May and see what that happens. I had talked to Fidel. He's not concerned whatsoever about this. And, you know, it's great to have Meadowbrook work with the town and to be able to convince all the members that to give the Conservation Commission this easement. So, and it's going to be a big help when we actually put that parking lot in place. So, no, this is tabled for the meeting. So
Okay.
no vote required.
Okay, so that brings us to old new business.
No, yeah, old new visits. The only other thing that I'd like to mention is that I'd like to get and this might have to come under administrator's report, but we did check out 44 Eastway and we'd like to get the commission to understand the project, understand the fact that the homeowner is in complete compliance with the request that the commission sent to the homeowner about cleaning up the debris and using it for his own storage area in the back of his property, which actually was given to the Conservation Commission and turned into conservation land while that homeowner lived at that property. So it wasn't something that was conservation land the entire time, but we did get a land gift, and then we asked the homeowner to remove numerous amounts of bricks. I mean, almost an entire, I don't know, entranceway to a mall in the back there, and some yard waste, and there was a makeshift driving range set up there, and he has done that and really taken care of it in a way that we would want. And he showed that you know, he was up to the task. He even dug out around some of the trees to expose the basal area and hopefully extend the life of those trees so they won't come down or die off from all those many years of being buried. So that's the only thing I bring. Brian was out there with me, but Martha was out there also. And if they want to add anything to that, but it would be great to get a vote.
Just for me taking the minutes, I'm not seeing this on the agenda. Did you say 44 Eastway?
It is not on the agenda.
Okay. So we're talking about 44 Eastway, and was this because of an enforcement situation or?
Yes, it was an
Okay.
enforcement order sent out to this gentleman
Terrific.
and with some dates to have some action done. He made each date, and we were supposed to do a site visit early April, but only got to it recently. And
And I want to make sure I have the nomenclature right. Would it be an enforcement order, letter, or what does the commission call it?
well, we actually sent out an enforcement order.
Enforcement order. Okay, thank you.
Martha?
So that's the only update we have on any enforcement orders. And I see 11 Pondview is listed here. Is there any progress on 11 Pondview?
Yes, there is a lot of progress. So the town has verified that they did accept the detention basin. And it's their responsibility to do any of the maintenance. The homeowner, the applicant, and their lawyer let me know that they've contacted Jack Sullivan, who will be surveying in that last monument. And as soon as that's installed, we'll be all set with that and show it. I'm not sure if he's going to come up with a plan, but I can go out there and check it out and make sure it's in place. And the last thing is I haven't received the letter confirming the fact that the responsible party is now the town. But when that comes in, we will have all of the things needed to finally say yes to this certificate of compliance.
How about the removal of the debris, including the silt fence beyond the detention area?
I was told that was done. Yeah, that was done. I will make sure that I mention that again in my next conversation with Rick. It's Rick Carter, who's the attorney taking care of this operation for the homeowner at 11 Pondview. So,
Okay, if that's done, that's wonderful. Okay, so that takes care of 7, and we're down to discussion items.
the only thing that I wanted to mention is maybe Bill wants the name of the guy that's living at 44 Eastway, and it's Carlo, right? Carlo
Casciano?
Casciano.
Carlo Casciano. Okay.
Casciano.
Oh, Cassiano.
I
Just
think
an
there's
S.
a C
Right.
after the S.
Yeah, there is. I meant to say it. If I didn't, I apologize.
Okay, so Casciano, correct? Okay, and Carlo is the first name.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Okay. No progress on the Terrace Park dog fence letter?
No response to the terrace fence. The I can't even 60 Terrace Park dog fence letter. No, there's no response, and I haven't been able to find time to get out there and see if that's in place or not. But it would be it's on my list for next week because there's some more dumping. There's some more yard waste dumping out there that was brought to my attention through the Trails Committee that has to be looked into.
So Chuck, if you're gonna take a trip out, let me know. I would relish yet another opportunity to show you I can walk in the woods.
Not a problem.
Okay.
Just get me that letter from Susan. Be all
It's
good.
underway.
All right.
For those of you who are new on the commission, this is a new trail that the Trails Committee put in from the new entrance to the woods that is the end of Veterans Way. And there's a little parking area and a entrance into the town land that came with building Veterans Way. And the Trails Committee put a trail in and then discovered that this owner has a electric fence that was laid onto town land, encroaching onto town land past the border of this person's property. And it crosses the trail, and people don't want to be tripping on the trail, on the wire as they walk on the trail. And Chuck has now put up the picture of Veterans Way, and you can see the little 2 parking spot there and the trail that goes in.
Yeah, so this place here that's town land. The rest is Kirchian Woods. And so it's not conservation land, it's not protected in perpetuity, it's not Chapter 97 land. It's actually a piece of property that's owned by town land, but the entrance to the trail comes up Veterans Way. And I don't know if this is accurate, but anyways, it goes through here like that. And something like that. And then 60 right here has a dog fence that kind of extends in this area. and there's a wire that's a tripping hazard right there. But also it was noted in the letter that was sent to the homeowner that that's not an appropriate use of open space land. Have not received a response from this homeowner. But, you know, the Trails Committee is out there a lot, and we're going to see what's happening, and then someone might run into him when we're working, doing the trails or something. So that's all there is. I mean, he was required to come to the Conservation Commission and didn't respond to that, and didn't respond to my letter.
Walter?
I've had electric fence for 30 years, and it's got a range, depending on how much it's said for it, it has a range as wide as 30 feet away from the wire. And what can happen is people take the electric collar off their dog, hold it up high so you don't get the reading. They then put the collar back on the dog when they're walking. So if somebody's walking their dog into that electric fence, the dog's going to get a shock.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good reason not to have electric fence going across the trail.
No.
Andrew?
Can we just cut the wire? At a certain point of no response? It's on town land, right?
Yeah, I know. So yeah, I'd probably have to, you know, bring the engineering department in on this. They're really, I let them know any decision we made about this property, which isn't all conservation land. I would let them know, but I'm not sure what the next response is. I think my response would be to be more persistent with contact.
So Chuck, is it worth going up and doing some door knocking like we did on other places recently?
Yeah, could be a good way to do it, and then we may find out that is not even part of the existing fence system. I think that what we know is that there is a tag on the lawn that says dog fence. So it makes sense that there's still one in place.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and the wire has the little flags along the wire indicating the location of the wire.
Okay, so then the order is we should go out there to verify that in fact it's still there. And if it is, it's time to go to the front door.
Mm-hmm.
And then as a third fallback, we can get Andy to put on some face paint and go out there at night and cut it.
If you cut it, they'll know immediately because an alarm will sound in their house.
Oh, what a shame.
Who did that?
Yeah, that's it right there. The sign is at the bottom of the mailbox that you just scrolled past. Yeah.
You always have to help me. I never could find that sign. So anyways, I can't even see it, but.
Well, I don't see it right now, but that's where I took the picture of it, is at the bottom of the mailbox. So it might not be there on Google Maps, but I sent you a photograph of that mailbox with a sign at the bottom.
There it is. I see the blue right there.
Suppose we should knock on the door before we cut the wire.
We're not going to keep cutting the wire. We're only kidding. That's not.
I don't want you electrocuted, Andrew. We need you on this commission.
You guys are funny, huh? But all right.
Okay. Do we want to do anything about the MAC Environmental Conference or put off that to another day?
I have one ready, but I'd just as soon put it off to another day. I want to try and catch the end of the Bruins game.
Okay. All right. Friends and Family Day discussion.
Before we get to that, Martha, is it during discussion items that I should propose the future discussion item that I had talked about? That is to put on a future agenda.
Sure, you can say that now.
Okay. So I'd just like to propose it as a discussion item at a future meeting, wherever it fits on the agenda, depending on how much business we have, just to remind everybody, section 1 of the Reading Wetlands Protection Regs, the local regs, say that from time to time and after a public hearing, the commission amends the Reading Wetlands Protection Regulations. They give 3 reasons, but just to focus on 2 of them. Amendments can be intended to formalize actions that the commission has taken to address recurrent issues, things that come up over and over, but aren't really explicitly in the regs, and we think they should be because it's just something the commission handles a lot. And number 2, to clarify language used in the regulations. So I just wanted to put as a future discussion item a discussion of this, because I think there are some possible items that are recurrent issues. And I definitely think there's some places where we might be able to clarify the language. And I'm happy to step up with that, but I think we should discuss first sort of the general idea and then see how the commission wants to proceed. Okay, and I don't know if you have to make a motion for that, or is it just something we can add for later?
Chuck, do you have an answer to that question?
Yeah, I think that we don't need a motion. The chair just would let us know that, it will be on the next agenda as a discussion item.
Okay. I would say if we have an agenda that does not look like it's got 7 hearings on it.
Exactly.
So if the agenda
sounds
looks
great
like
to me,
it will
Martha.
fit, fine. If we go past 10 o'clock, we'll put it off till the next meeting.
Sounds great to me. Thank you.
Okay.
So what we're expecting is a more formal discussion, and after that, some action items that would come out of that next formal discussion, right?
Right. Does
Okay.
the commission ever, I know commissions can do this, but do you ever have, well, like, for example, you and Brian, and thank you very much, have been working on enforcement, something that I hope down the line I'll be able to get involved in. I just can't yet. But this is something I can work on if that's the way the commission wants to go, perhaps with you, Chuck. But I don't know, is that a formal thing where the commission says, okay, you all work on this, sort of like a subcommittee thing, or is it sort of done informally?
So we redid the regulations back in 2000 and when I first got here. So I had started prior to me getting here and was finished while I was here. And there was a subcommittee and minutes had to be taken. So it's a big deal. I think what we want to do is look into this and be more prepared to discuss different options at the next meeting. That'll give you a chance to get together what the sections are you want to talk about, and me a chance to figure out if there's a way we can have a non-quorum group, not called a subcommittee, review this and present to the Conservation Commission, and then the Conservation Commission will approve. It seems like that would be the way to go. I don't expect and didn't hear from you that you're looking at all the regulations. Right now, there's just a couple of things that you want to take care of, and so this may work.
That's absolutely, I see it almost as housekeeping. Certain expressions we use a lot. It'd be nice to have them in there, in parenthetical, that kind of thing. And I'm thinking about my work with the federal government or even with regulations at a university. If it's that kind of housekeeping stuff, they usually don't make you get very formal with it. Okay, great.
Correct. And it was a full redo of the regulations that I've been used to. Now, I know that, one of the stories I heard when I first got here is that the old administrator would constantly make changes, which was something that the town didn't like. So I want to make sure that I talk to the appropriate people prior to giving advice on how we're going to approach this.
And if I can just suggest, Chuck, when you do that, I would emphasize what we're seeking to do is clarify language used in the regulations to help the community. We're just trying to make some things clear. That's really what I have in mind, as opposed to, we're we're trying to do a wholesale revision.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tony, do you have comments on that?
I just have some questions on the procedure. I'm new to all of this and I've never amended, town bylaws or, promulgated any type of regulation or even issued an informal guidance statement. And I'm just curious as to whether that responsibility lies solely with the Conservation Commission. Is there a public comment period? Are there public meetings that have to be held to talk about any changes? Does town council have to weigh in? What are some of the gates that would have to go through?
I have a great answer. Save that question for the next meeting. That's exactly what I'm going to look into. I don't want to give any information that I have to walk back at the next meeting, but that's exactly what we're going to find out.
And can I just say, my assumption in even proposing this was looking at this very straightforward language. From time to time and after a public hearing, the commission amends the Reading Wetlands Protection Regulations. Then it talks about 3. So actually the way it's written here, it looks very simple. Chuck may find this very complicated, but Tony, to answer your question, just look at section 1, the introduction, paragraph 3. It looks pretty straightforward, but we'll see.
That could just be a summary of, a much deeper process.
Right. And if it is, well, someone should have thought that through. Thanks.
So I will tell you, well, it doesn't even matter what another town does. So let's just move on because I remember there is a Bruins game tonight. So let's,
Okay, Friends and Family Day discussion. Anybody who wants to help at our table at Friends and Family Day on June 10th, please look at your calendars and be prepared to volunteer. Otherwise, it's Brian and me and Chuck.
Bill said. he
And
would
Bill
do it.
has volunteered
Yeah.
an hour or so and.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so anybody else who is interested, please let us know. We'd be glad to have you join us.
Yeah, it'd be really good. Yeah.
If it helps any, I'll bring my bottle of Jack Daniels so we can share it in the course of the day.
Don't say that on public television here.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, and the only minutes that I saw come through are March 22nd by Brian. Have people had a chance to look those over, and does anybody have any complaints? Or amendments, I should say.
I just want to say thank you to Brian. They looked great to me.
They looked good to me also.
In that case, is it time for a motion?
I'm letting people have a chance to look if they haven't looked yet.
I'm just reviewing it. Yeah, they look fine. Oh, they're great. Thank you, Brian.
Okay. Can somebody other than Brian make a motion this time?
This is Andrew. I'll make a motion to approve the March 22nd meeting minutes.
It's Bill McCants, I second.
Brian Bowe in favor?
Bill McCants in favor?
Andrew Gibbon in favor.
John Sullivan in favor.
Martha Moore in favor. Okay, and I have worked on my April 12th minutes, but I have not got them finished yet, so I have to make sure I work on them some more. I need either the transcript or the RCTV. I've done what I took notes on, but I want to go back for more details. Okay, and
I'm working on the January 25th ones.
good, thank you. And John, I think February 22nd was on your plate.
Yep. And slowly but surely they're coming along.
Okay, thank you very much.
And before we wrap up, Chuck, I know how busy you are, but if I could get a Word version of tonight's agenda, again, that'd be super helpful to me for doing the notes.
Sure. And sorry, I thought I sent it to you at the very beginning of the meeting.
You may have. I haven't checked my email, so thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just Bill, I have found that I can copy and paste right out of the PDF into my Word document. And I start with a previous Word document like the one Brian made and modify that for the.
Yeah,
agenda for the
I
minutes.
found if I did that, Martha, that all the boldface and so forth disappeared and it all came in a clump. Maybe it's my software, but anyway,
Okay.
thank you.
Yeah, but to start with like Brian's most recent minutes and use that template to make the new minutes is very helpful.
Thank you. And Chuck, I did receive your email.
Okay,
Thank you.
I was going to ask. Thank you.
Okay, so do we have anything else or can we have a motion to adjourn?
This is Brian. I'm making a motion that we adjourn.
At 9:46.
46.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
All in favor?
In favor.
Okay. All right, we're adjourned.
Good night, everybody.
Enjoy your Bruins game.
Yeah.
What's left of it.
Yeah.
Not much.
Good night.
Good night.